Don't Tell Me the Time, from the album Policy, Martha Davis's first solo album back in 1987. Martha's my guest here on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Martha, from the first couple albums into All For One, which was probably your biggest chart success in America, there was a pretty big difference in the music. It took a sort of a darker bend in the first couple of years and then became a little more...
M-O-R. It became a little bit more mainstream.
I would say mainstream, but I would say a little more appealing to the mainstream audience.
Yeah, I think what was happening, the first two albums, actually the first album is one of my favorites. It really is, because to me that captured what I always, what I think of myself as being about, and that is a sort of a darker, weird, in fact, I use the term sort of film noir of music. I like writing these crazy little vignettes that are very provocative and hopefully atmospheric, so that when you're listening to the song, you kind of get transported a little more instead of just, sitting there tapping your toe. You kind of feel like you've drifted off somewhere. And the first two albums were, especially the first album, was literally we were playing Madame Wong's every week, and sometimes up to 3 and 4 times a week. And Carter, the A&R guy from Capitol Records, had come down and seen us and was very sure that we were going to get signed to Capitol Records. In fact, he was so sure that we were going to get signed to Capitol Records, he booked recording time like months in advance. And there was a bit of a feeding frenzy about the motels, because everybody had, the record companies had just found out that there was some local talent in their backyards when the Knack had a big hit and stuff like that. So there was a lot of A&R guys out scouting for new talent. And we had a buzz going on, so there was some definite interest from different labels. But Carter was sure we were going to end up on Capitol. So he books the time, and we finished playing our sets in Madame Wong's, Friday night. Saturday, I think, was a day off. Sunday was Mother's Day. And Sunday we signed the contract, and Monday we went into the studio. Now, that really doesn't happen to a lot of bands, because usually you get signed to a label, but there's like months of legal stuff back and forth. Well, that had all taken place, and by the time all the legalities were straightened out and everything was done, boom, we signed the deal, and next day in the studio. So it was a real whirlwind, and it was very kind of confusing. I mean, it was kind of like, here we are, this little street band trying to make it, and then boom, in a recording studio. But what Carter did was he just let the band do what it did. Basically, we played the same set that we played at Madame Wong's, sort of the day before yesterday, kind of thing. And he is one of those producers who, there's all different kinds. Some are totally hands-on. Some want to make everything theirs. Some come from an engineering standpoint. Some come from a music background. Carter is one of these more zen producers. He kind of sat back and let us do whatever it was we wanted with little interference. So you pretty much in the first album get what the Motels were about. In the second album, still more of that, but there was more co-writing. I think there was more of my stuff on the first one. Second album changed guitar players, too, from Jeff Gerard to Tim McGovern. And Tim McGovern was a huge musical force. I mean, he's just a brilliant musician. Also, my boyfriend at the time. Not so good as a boyfriend as a musician. But so that album had changed a lot because of his influence. He was he played drums and guitar, and he was just a very visionary kind of musician. And then we recorded the third album, which was called Apocalypso. And Apocalypso was pretty much done completely by Tim McGovern, even though now we had switched over to producer Val Garay from Carter. But Tim McGovern, being as strong as he was, had pretty much made that album himself in terms of the vision of how it sounded and stuff like that. I still wrote most of the stuff, but he was very dominant in how it sounded. And we brought that to Capitol Records when it was finished, and they said, you can release it if you want to, but we're not really going to promote it because it's just a little too freaky. They thought it was too strange. So, and they said there was no singles on it as well, even though Only Lonely was on that album. It just was produced differently.
What did they
so
know,
at that
right?
point, Tim, who was being not a good boyfriend in some ways, it wasn't good. So I fired him as guitar player and boyfriend. Val Garay then steps in and takes over. Now, Val Garay, who had been known for Betty Davis Eyes, that was his big hit before we went to him, then came in with his team of guys that are very, very, very much a very pop machine. And Stephen Goldstein being his main keyboard guy who did a lot of the arranging and stuff like that. And Steve and I even wrote some stuff together. He's awesome. But it became very much more pop, more shiny, more produced, more this is what the public wants, let's give it to them. And that was the remake of the Apocalypse, which turned into All for One, the title being about it's the fourth album, even though it's only the third. It's the fourth one that we did. So, and that was when the hits came, which was kind of sad for me because it really wasn't my favorite music. I wanted to do stuff that was a lot more, left of center. But I stayed with Val for one more album, and then he was very difficult to work with, and I kind of had it. And so I moved on from him to Richie Zito, who was the exact opposite. I mean, Richie is a love. He's just like the greatest guy in the world, but even more pop, I think, than Val. So what was happening to me is I was moving further and further away from the direction that I wanted to be in, and it was pretty much at the hands of producers because that whole time, even though I was the front person of this band, I didn't really have the confidence. Even though I wrote the music, I didn't have the confidence to stand up against these powerhouses of, musical, vision. And I think I was intimidated because they've been doing it, for years, and what do I know, and blah, blah, blah.
Surely you got to stick some of yourself in these songs, even if they were heavily producer-influenced big hits.
I did insert myself, but I would insert myself mostly just melodically. I mean, I would come up with sing lines that people should say, have in the song. But I was just never that sure of myself in terms of, and it's just like, also, I think I'm one of those people that is easily sort of, I can be easily bulldozed. Let's just put it that way. If somebody comes in and they're like, I'm going to, I'm like, okay. The other thing is, as long as I'm making music, I'm still having fun at some level. Even if it's not the music that I would like, I don't get frustrated because I'm making music. It's great, But this has all changed now because in the last years, I've become very, very, very much more involved in how I do music and what I'm doing, and very much more involved with sonics. I'm producing myself. I'm even producing other people, so that part's changed now, thank goodness.
You did allude to the album Shock a little while ago, and after that one, around 1987, you decided to go out on your own. What prompted you to leave the Motels?
It had just gotten to that point where the band was no longer the band that it used to be, it's difficult having a band under any circumstances because it's like being married to 5 people at once, and we all know about being married to one person. There's a lot of personality. There's also pressure from the outside. There was always pressure from the record company to divide them from me, to make me, well, you're the star, they're just, nobody's coming to see them, blah, 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 blah. Now, whether it's true or not, I didn't want to hear that at that point. And I'm like, no, it's the Motels. It's not Martha Davis and the Motels, and I was real vehement about it. This is a band, darn it, and we're sticking together as a band, to the point where actually I kind of shot myself in the foot because when I did go off on my own, people knew the Motels but didn't necessarily know Martha Davis. So I did a good job. But at the end, what it was we were just, the money had run out, and the wedge that the record company was driving in between the band members and myself, and also producers do the same thing. Producers like to work with their own guys, and so they would band would come in and they'd say, yeah, I'm going to have so-and-so play drums on this, and I'm going to have this and such, and it just gets demoralized. And I think at the end, all of us were totally demoralized the Policy album started out to be a Motels album, and we were all, getting ready to go in and record it, but it was just, there was no love left, in the sense that we love each other, but there was no love left for the project. And one day, I think it was Valentine's Day, actually, as the guys would straggle into the studio one by one, I would take them across the street, buy them a drink, and fire them. And Michael Goodrow still refers to that as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And what happened then was there was this void where I didn't have a band, but I had a record that was due and a producer, and so then it turned into just this crazy pop put-together thing where Richie hired all these guys, the record companies, decides I need to play with all these. I mean, Kenny G's on that record. I was singing a Diane Warren song. It was kind of like everything that I was not, did not resonate with me.
You had Clarence Clemens on there.
Yeah, Clarence Clemens, the big man, was on there, but I mean, at this point, they so wanted pop hits out of me that it was like, oh, you need to write with so-and-so, you need to write with so-and-so, oh, here's this Diane Warren song, oh, blah, 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 blah. The whole point is that I'm a songwriter. That's what I am more than anything. I don't want to be a diva. I don't want to be some big, singer star. I don't want to be Celine Dion. I want to write songs. So what had happened was I had gone completely against what I got into it for. And after putting together my own tour in Australia and redoing my publishing down there, and because the record company didn't want to do it, they said, no, we can't afford it. And so I kind of set it up myself when I was there on a promo tour. And it went down into this grueling tour, like really one of the craziest Australian tours ever. And got back, and I just called my lawyer, and I said, get me off this label. I can't do this. This is just not what I want anymore. And for the first time in my life, I went for 1 year without writing a song, which is really bizarre for me, because ever since I've been 15, I've been writing, I write a lot. I've hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of songs. So it's, it ended up very, very sad. And for a year, I didn't, like I said, I just upholstered furniture. I'd buy, pieces of, I love furniture. I'd buy pieces of furniture at the thrift store and redo them. And I didn't do any music. For 1 year, I just didn't do it. And then, of course, I started back in again. And I really started all over. I started from the complete bottom. I got a bunch of really young kids up in Ventura that had never been on a label. I mean, this is me. I've been, I've toured the world. I've been on Capitol Records 8 years. I went back. I got some young guys, put together this band, basic garage band, and started all over again from the very beginning. And I worked through it. But this time I was really present, because I think during the time that I was going through my initial success, I was so traumatized by the death of my parents, by the fact that I was, I think I was sort of on automatic pilot the whole time. It was a very sort of darkness to it. Only the Lonely Can Play is all about that. It's about that feeling of, oh boy, here we are driving in the limo with roses and champagne, and my heart was pretty much breaking at that time. So it's been a long trip, but now I'm working myself. I worked myself through many incarnations of new bands, sometimes even changing the names to Martha Davis Jr., or for a few seconds it was the WMD's Weapons of Martha Davis.
There you go.
But finally, coming to the point where I now play with a lot of different musicians. Like, I have some musicians in L.A. that I love, who I love to play with. I have some new musicians in Portland that I play with. Spending a lot of time in the studio. So it's come full circle, but at least this time I'm sort of in charge of it.